trying to give us some answers to the questions that South Africans have as we go into day 5 of load shedding. My colleague Michael Apple has been in the studio with me. We've been listening together to what Pravin Gordhan and company have been saying, Michael. I mean, where do we begin? First of all, Pravin Gordhan says, you know, they're very sorry for what South Africans are experiencing. Load shedding really is a last option and we don't take it lightly. That's a quote. But at the end of the day, South Africans must understand this discomfort is essential if we're going to fix the crisis, and it is a crisis that we are in.
Yeah, that word, crisis, once again coming up. The President said it yesterday when he was stuck on a train for several hours. This discomfort that Jabu, Mabuza and Pravin Gordhan is asking South Africans to go through. Did you notice how many of the questions were, why are we in this situation again? One of the journalists from The Citizen saying there's a 9-point plan, there's a technical task team, there are experts that are sitting around you there. How on earth do we find ourselves in a situation again in summer, and the stage 4 load shedding began over the weekend when there's the lowest demand? How do we find ourselves in this situation again? And that timeline for the interim, the 10 to 14 days, is pretty much saying South Africans get comfortable with being in the dark for at least the next 2 weeks, at a cost of, Ted Blum saying, 2 billion rand to our economy a day that we are shared at stage 4. This is not a tenable situation, one that can continue when we are preaching investment and we're preaching economic growth. Those two are at odds at the moment.
Well, let's take a look at some of the figures that you and I were researching as that press briefing was underway. As you've mentioned, Ted Blom talking about that 2 billion rand per day that we are losing as a result of the effect on our economy. He puts that figure at 1.4 trillion rand to the South African economy. That's the effect that the crisis at Eskom has had on our economy. Let's just unpack that figure, trillion. So
how many zeros is that?
So that's 12 zeros.
Crazy.
1 trillion would be 1,000 billion rand.
Yeah.
The numbers are staggering, and I just wonder how much a press briefing like this does to allay the fears, the real fears of South African small businesses, for example.
Yeah, forget the pun in poor taste, perhaps, but are South Africans further in the dark after a briefing like this, where South Africans and the media are told to go look at an 11-minute video about boiler tube failures? I would encourage people to do that, because I wouldn't be one of them, because I just don't know how that's going to help us. What South Africans, I think, want to know is, I'm paying an increased tariff now, 13% over the next 3 years.
Last week.
Once I flick the switch, the light must come on. I think as taxpayers, as consumers, that's what you want. So 600 kilometers from here to Durban, boiler tube failures, it's technical. You need an engineering degree, I think, to sit in those rooms and actually understand what that means. All we know is we're being told to take the pain for now and at least for the next 2 weeks, and then they'll reassess.
All right, Michael, so let's, as we continue to sort of unpack the story and try to get to grips with the crisis that we are in, let's talk about the fact that, in fact, South Africa does. We know that South Africa exports power, but it also gets power from other parts of the country. Just unpack that for us.
That's right. So the hurt is being felt locally, but Eskom is the biggest electricity provider and generator in the SADC region. So who does Eskom supply, besides South Africa, of course, and not very well at the moment? There are 7 other countries that are reliant on Eskom: Swaziland, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, and Mozambique. And what you're going to have is we sell to certain neighbors, of course, Eskom being the biggest in the region. And this just gives you an idea of the reliance on Eskom in our neighboring countries. Zimbabwe has gone through a very rough time. Massive industrial consumers, mining is not the demand. The local power producers not able to meet that demand, so they come to South Africa. So it's gone up from 154 gigawatt hours about 6 years ago. That's climbed to 2,250 gigawatt hours is what they procured from Eskom in 2017-2018.
And that's the big question, isn't it?
This is the biggest question
South Africans will be asking.
Is the hurt being felt locally, and say people in Botswana and Namibia, do they have electricity at the cost of South Africans? No, not exactly. So there are two countries within our borders, Swaziland and Lesotho, that will be proportionately load shed. As South Africans are feeling the pinch, so are they. The other SADC consumers of Eskom will not be receiving electricity while there is no excess to sell. When everything is running smoothly, examples, Zambia and Zimbabwe get during peak hours, 50 megawatts. Off peak, they can get 300 megawatts. So there are these procurement supply deals in place. South Africa, at certain times, gets a daily amount of electricity from Cahora Bassa, which has now been decimated by this cyclone. 1,000 up to 1,500, I've heard, between 900, 1,200. Kulupasiwe yesterday telling me up to 1,500 megawatts daily. If stage 1 load shedding is 1,000 megawatts, this is more than 1,000 megawatts we are not getting from that. And lastly, if Eskom is looking to, as Ted Blom said, buy or sell its way out of its debt crisis, 419 billion rand in the red. It's got 7 consumers around it. Is it going to be selling over the next 5 to 10 years, increasing those tariffs to try and recoup some of the money that it's lost? The hydroelectric potential in Zambia, Mozambique, and the DRC, 1,000 megawatts in the short to medium term, 5,000 and 20,000 in the DRC after 2025. These are countries that are not going to be coming to Eskom in the short to medium term and saying, we need your electricity. So that is just not a sustainable way to try and balance the books in the future.
Yeah, the priority would have to be to keep the lights on in South Africa. Thanks very much for that, Michael Apple. Just giving us a broader picture of what our contractual obligations are to our neighbours in terms of providing energy to those 7 countries in the SADC region.